Welcome to Smart Reads in Minutes. Today we're diving into The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene with a detailed chapter-by-chapter summary. Let's get started. Law 1. Never outshine the master. Robert Greene begins by emphasizing the importance of maintaining a delicate balance in relationships with those in power. The worst mistake one can make is to outshine their superior, as it can breed insecurity and resentment. Throughout history, ambitious individuals have often met tragic ends because they inadvertently eclipse their masters. A notable example is the downfall of Nicolas Fouquet, the finance minister of France under Louis XIV. Fouquet, despite his immense wealth and influence, sought to impress the king with a grand celebration at his chateau. Rather than securing favor, his ostentatious display only highlighted his power, making Louis XIV feel overshadowed. The king swiftly acted, having Fouquet arrested and imprisoned for life. Greene points out that rulers and those in high positions often have deep-seated insecurities. They wish to be admired, not outdone. Even if they appear gracious, they do not easily forget when someone threatens their authority. The safest approach is to subtly flatter them, allowing them to take credit for ideas and ensuring they always feel superior. Historical figures like Galileo mastered this art, cleverly dedicating his astronomical discoveries to the Medici family by naming celestial bodies after them. Rather than presenting himself as the true genius, he made his patrons the stars of the show, ensuring their support and avoiding their envy. This law involves two key strategies. First, one must assess their master's level of insecurity. If the superior is exceptionally vain, it is crucial to downplay one's strengths and defer to them. Second, if the master is powerful but stable, one must be patient, waiting for an opportunity to rise without making enemies. Flattery, humility, and discretion are essential tools in navigating the complex power dynamics of hierarchical relationships. To succeed, one must never take their superior's goodwill for granted. The moment a master perceives a threat, they will act ruthlessly to remove it. Law 2. Never put too much trust in friends, learn how to use enemies. Greene warns against placing blind trust in friends, arguing that they are often the ones most likely to betray. Friends, when elevated to positions of power, can become entitled, jealous, or even resentful. Since friendships are built on emotions, they may lack the necessary objectivity and professionalism required in matters of power. Enemies, on the other hand, often prove to be more reliable allies, as their motivation to prove their loyalty is stronger. A historical example of this principle is the story of Michael III, the Byzantine emperor who placed his trust in his closest friend Basilius. Michael elevated Basilius from obscurity to a position of great influence, only to be betrayed by him later. Basilius, once a grateful and devoted ally, became power-hungry, ultimately murdering Michael to seize the throne for himself. This cautionary tale illustrates that those who rise due to personal favor rather than merit are often the most dangerous. By contrast, enemies have more incentive to prove themselves. Greene cites Talleyrand, Napoleon's foreign minister, who strategically allied with his longtime rival, Joseph Fouché. Though they despised each other, their partnership was effective because it was based purely on mutual interest, rather than personal attachment. Enemies can be converted into powerful allies because they have more to prove, whereas friends often become complacent. Greene concludes that true power lies in maintaining professional distance and relying on competence over personal ties. While friendship should be kept for personal matters, in business and politics, it is often wiser to align with those who have something to gain and something to lose. This pragmatic approach ensures loyalty is based on necessity rather than sentiment, making betrayal less likely. Law 3. Conceal your intentions. Greene stresses the importance of secrecy in matters of power. Revealing too much about one's plans allows others to prepare defenses or even sabotage efforts. People tend to trust appearances, making it easy to mislead them by projecting a false sense of intention. The key is to keep adversaries guessing, leading them down the wrong path until it is too late for them to react. A classic example of this strategy is Otto von Bismarck, the Prussian statesman who masterfully concealed his true intentions. When Prussia faced potential war with Austria, Bismarck initially advocated for peace, knowing that openly pushing for war would make him unpopular. Once he secured his position as prime minister, he secretly strengthened the Prussian military and manipulated events to justify an eventual conflict. Because he had previously spoken in favor of peace, no one suspected that war was his ultimate goal. By the time his true intentions were revealed, it was too late for Austria to counter his moves. Another powerful method of concealment is the use of red herrings, deliberate distractions that mislead others. Napoleon Bonaparte often misled his enemies by pretending to be interested in one strategy while secretly preparing another. The Duke of Marlborough employed a similar tactic in the War of the Spanish Succession, making his enemies believe he was focused on one target while preparing a surprise attack elsewhere. Greene advises that the most effective way to mislead others is not through silence, but by speaking openly, just not about one's real plans. By engaging in meaningless honesty or discussing irrelevant goals, one creates the illusion of transparency while concealing the true agenda. A false sense of sincerity can be the most effective disguise. The law also cautions against developing a reputation for deception. Once people suspect someone is deceitful, their guard remains up. The ideal power player should appear sincere and trustworthy while subtly misleading others. By mastering the art of misdirection, one can control situations without alerting others to their real intentions. Law 4. Always say less than necessary. Robert Greene explains that words have immense power, but the more one speaks, the more one risks exposing weaknesses. In the game of power, silence and brevity convey strength, while excessive talking can undermine authority. When people say too much, they often reveal their true thoughts, which can be used against them. Even if one speaks the truth, too many words dilute their impact. Silence, on the other hand, makes a person seem mysterious, controlled, and powerful. Greene illustrates this law with an anecdote about Louis XIV, the Sun King of France. Known for his calculated speech, Louis rarely spoke more than necessary. Whenever his ministers approached him with detailed discussions, he would listen silently and respond with a simple phrase like, "I shall see." This created an aura of mystery around him, making his subjects uncertain of his thoughts and afraid to act against him. Because he said so little, his words carried immense weight when he did speak. His silence ensured that no one could manipulate him or predict his next move. A contrasting example is the tragic fate of Kondratij Ryleyev, a Russian revolutionary sentenced to death. When the execution rope unexpectedly snapped, an event often interpreted as a sign of divine intervention, he sarcastically remarked, "You see, in Russia, they don't even know how to make rope properly." His words were reported to the Tsar, who had been considering a pardon. Instead, the Tsar revoked it, and Ryleyev was hanged again the next day. This illustrates how unnecessary words can be fatal. Greene highlights that silence makes people uncomfortable, compelling them to fill in the blanks. When someone remains quiet, others reveal more than they should in an attempt to understand what the silent person is thinking. In negotiations, a quiet presence can force an opponent to concede more than they intended. Additionally, saying less creates an illusion of intelligence. People will assume there is deeper meaning behind simple, concise statements. However, Greene warns that silence must be used strategically. In some cases, being too quiet can backfire, creating suspicion or appearing arrogant. The key is to balance saying little with carefully chosen words that enhance one's power. In political, business, and social settings, those who control their speech control the narrative. The fewer words one speaks, the more value and weight those words carry. Law 5. So much depends on reputation. Guard it with your life. Greene asserts that reputation is one of the most valuable assets in the game of power. A strong reputation creates respect and fear, giving a person influence without them having to take direct action. However, once reputation is damaged, it is nearly impossible to repair. The best way to protect it is to remain vigilant against attacks and eliminate threats before they gain traction. To illustrate this, Greene recounts the story of General Erwin Rommel, the legendary German military strategist known as the Desert Fox. Rommel's reputation for tactical brilliance was so strong that entire enemy armies feared him, even when he was outnumbered. His reputation alone won battles before they even began. Similarly, Henry Kissinger used his reputation for diplomacy to exert influence. His mere involvement in negotiations created the expectation of success. When a person builds a strong reputation, it precedes them, shaping how others perceive and respond to them. However, reputation is fragile. Greene provides an example of Thomas Edison's battle with Nikola Tesla. When Tesla developed a superior electrical system, alternating current, Edison attempted to ruin Tesla's reputation by conducting public electrocutions of animals to make AC power seem dangerous. While Edison's tactics were brutal, they demonstrate that a targeted attack on reputation can be a lethal weapon. If an opponent's credibility is shattered, they lose influence, and public opinion turns against them. Greene advises that reputation should be actively cultivated and defended. One must anticipate attacks and respond strategically without appearing desperate. If an enemy spreads lies, sometimes the best response is to ignore the attack, letting it die out. Other times, launching a counterattack through humor, satire, or exposure can dismantle the enemy's credibility. However, Greene warns that attacking a rival's reputation must be done with precision, as an overly aggressive smear campaign can backfire, making the attacker look petty. The most effective way to maintain a strong reputation is to establish oneself as exceptional in a specific area. Whether it be honesty, cunning, or generosity, having a dominant trait ensures that others speak of you in ways that reinforce your image. Once a reputation is solidified, it works as a protective shield, making attacks against you less effective. Greene concludes that those who control their reputation control their power, and those who allow their reputation to be dictated by others will always be vulnerable. Law 6. Court attention at all cost. Greene emphasizes that in the modern world, visibility equals power. Those who fade into the background are forgotten, while those who stand out, whether through brilliance, eccentricity, or controversy, command influence. People are drawn to the larger-than-life figures who dominate conversations, the media, and the public's imagination. The key to power is to remain at the center of attention at all times. To illustrate this, Greene tells the story of P.T. Barnum, the famous showman who mastered the art of publicity. Barnum understood that any attention, even negative attention, was better than being ignored. He deliberately staged scandals, hoaxes, and outrageous spectacles to keep people talking about him. Even when critics denounced him, their attacks only fueled his fame. Barnum's philosophy was simple. Controversy attracts curiosity, and curiosity attracts influence. This principle applies beyond entertainment. Historical leaders like Napoleon and Louis XIV carefully cultivated their public personas, ensuring that they remained the focal point of their nations. Even when they faced criticism, they maintained control by dominating public discourse. People remember those who create spectacle, not those who remain neutral. Greene also discusses the power of uniqueness. Figures like Andy Warhol, Salvador Dali, and Marilyn Monroe became icons by embracing their eccentricities. Rather than conforming, they exaggerated their uniqueness, making themselves impossible to ignore. Even negative portrayals helped maintain their public image. Monroe, for example, was constantly in the tabloids, but this only reinforced her status as a symbol of allure and mystery. However, Greene warns that attention-seeking must be strategic. While controversy can elevate a person's status, excessive scandal can destroy credibility. Those who rely on shock value alone will eventually become predictable and fade into irrelevance. The most powerful figures know how to balance notoriety with respectability, ensuring that their image remains compelling without becoming tiresome. To remain in the spotlight, one must constantly reinvent themselves. Picasso, for instance, deliberately changed artistic styles to keep the public intrigued. In contrast, artists who refuse to evolve are quickly forgotten. The key to sustaining attention is to control the narrative, to ensure that people are always talking about you, but in a way that reinforces your power. Greene concludes that blending in is the surest path to mediocrity. Those who seek power must command attention by any means necessary, crafting a persona that captivates, intrigues, and demands recognition. Whether through talent, charisma, or calculated controversy, those who dominate the conversation ultimately control the game of power. Law 7. Get others to do the work for you, but always take the credit. Robert Greene explains that power often comes from the ability to leverage the work and intelligence of others, while maintaining the image of sole responsibility for success. Those who attempt to do everything themselves not only exhaust their own resources, but also fail to create the illusion of extraordinary capability. The most powerful individuals and leaders in history have mastered the ability to delegate work while ensuring that all credit flows back to them. One of the most famous examples is the relationship between Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla. While Tesla was a brilliant inventor who dedicated himself to technological advancement, Edison was a master of strategy. Edison did not concern himself with doing all the scientific work. Instead, he surrounded himself with talented individuals like Tesla, absorbing their innovations and branding them under his name. Edison understood that in the world of power, being the visible figurehead is more valuable than being the actual creator. Tesla, on the other hand, refused to play the power game. He believed in scientific integrity over self-promotion and was ultimately left in obscurity while Edison cemented his legacy. Greene emphasizes that credit is as important, if not more important, than actual work. Those who fail to claim ownership over their contributions often find their ideas stolen or forgotten. Power lies in the ability to control the narrative, making sure that success is attributed to oneself rather than subordinates. The Roman artist Peter Paul Rubens provides a perfect example of this. In his later years, he was overwhelmed with commissions but still managed to maintain his reputation as a prolific artist. His secret was that he employed a large studio of skilled painters to complete his works. Yet, when wealthy patrons visited his workshop, he would dismiss his assistants and personally apply a few finishing strokes on each painting. To the patrons, it appeared as though Rubens had single-handedly created every masterpiece, reinforcing his legendary status. Greene warns, however, that one must be cautious when taking credit. If power is not yet firmly established, stealing recognition can backfire. Those in early stages of power must carefully balance self-promotion with strategic humility, allowing others to share minor credit while reserving the most significant achievements for themselves. This balance ensures continued dominance, while avoiding resentment from those whose work is being leveraged. Law 8. Make other people come to you. Use bait if necessary. Robert Greene argues that control is the essence of power, and control is best maintained when one forces others to act on their terms. The key to power is to never act out of emotion or impulse, but to carefully manipulate situations so that opponents, rivals, or even allies make the first move. By making others come to you, you control the situation, set the terms, and weaken your adversaries before any real engagement occurs. A historical example of this strategy is Talleyrand, the French diplomat, who orchestrated Napoleon's downfall by subtly influencing events rather than directly attacking him. When Napoleon was exiled to Elba, many European leaders debated whether he was still a threat. Instead of advocating outright for his permanent removal, Talleyrand remained calm, refraining from taking a clear position. Napoleon, however, fell for the psychological trap. Feeling underestimated and desiring a return to power, he made the mistake of escaping Elba and attempting to reclaim France. The moment he did this, his enemies had justification to act against him, leading to his final defeat. Another example is found in military history, particularly the Russo-Japanese War of 1905. The Japanese, despite being less militarily advanced than Russia, spread false intelligence that lured the Russian fleet into an exhausting 6,000-mile journey from the Baltic to the Pacific. By the time the Russian Navy arrived, they were demoralized and weakened, allowing the Japanese to annihilate them in battle. Japan never chased Russia. It merely laid the perfect trap and waited. Greene explains that waiting is often a more powerful tactic than acting impulsively. When someone chases an enemy or an opportunity too aggressively, they reveal their intentions and place themselves in a vulnerable position. Instead, one should bait adversaries with irresistible opportunities, forcing them to abandon their own strategies and fall into carefully laid traps. However, Greene also notes that this strategy is not universal. In cases where waiting allows enemies to recover or regroup, immediate action may be necessary. Figures like Cesare Borgia and Napoleon Bonaparte understood this, using rapid, unexpected strikes when the situation demanded urgency. The lesson is that one must assess whether waiting will weaken the enemy or give them time to grow stronger. The ultimate goal is always to force the enemy into a position of weakness while maintaining control of the battlefield, whether literal or metaphorical. Law 9. Win through your actions, never through argument. Robert Greene warns against the illusion of victory in argument. Many people believe that winning a debate means winning power, but in reality, intellectual victory often results in resentment rather than influence. When one defeats someone in an argument, they may temporarily concede, but deep down, they harbor bitterness, wounded pride, and a desire for revenge. A more powerful strategy is to demonstrate superiority through action rather than words. One of the most famous examples comes from the great artist Michelangelo. When commissioned to sculpt the statue of David, his patron Soderini criticized the nose, claiming it was too large. Michelangelo pretended to adjust the statue by subtly dropping some dust while making no real change. Soderini, believing he had been heard and that the nose had been altered, was satisfied. Michelangelo had preserved the perfection of his work without damaging his relationship with his patron. Had he argued, he might have risked losing future commissions. Greene emphasizes that people are rarely persuaded through logic alone. Humans are emotional creatures, and defeating someone in a verbal confrontation often damages relationships irreparably. A better strategy is to demonstrate truth through undeniable results. Christopher Wren, the famous English architect, faced a similar situation when he designed a town hall in Westminster. City officials doubted the structural integrity of the second floor, fearing that it might collapse. Rather than arguing, Wren installed temporary wooden supports underneath the floor. The officials, seeing the supports, were satisfied. Years later, after the officials had forgotten the dispute, Wren quietly removed the supports, proving that the structure had always been sound. Greene explains that argument is risky because words are open to interpretation. A person might claim victory in a debate, but the defeated party will often find ways to undermine them later. In contrast, demonstrating strength through action leaves no room for doubt or resentment. The law also applies to power struggles in daily life. Instead of trying to convince a stubborn opponent with words, one should create circumstances that force them to acknowledge reality without direct confrontation. By winning through action rather than debate, one ensures lasting influence while avoiding unnecessary conflict. Law 10. Infection, avoid the unhappy and unlucky. Robert Greene warns that misfortune and emotional states are highly contagious. Just as diseases spread through contact, so too can negative energy, bad luck, and self-destructive behavior. Associating with those who are perpetually unhappy or unlucky can pull even the strongest individuals into their downward spiral. He describes such individuals as infectors, people whose very presence drains energy, poisons the atmosphere and brings about misfortune to all those around them. One of the most striking examples of this phenomenon is the story of Lola Montez, a 19th-century dancer and courtesan who brought ruin to every man she became involved with. Her charm and beauty initially captivated powerful men, but her fiery temper and erratic behavior soon caused their downfall. King Ludwig I of Bavaria was so enthralled by her that he ignored public resentment and made her a countess. However, her disruptive influence on politics and court affairs ultimately led to his abdication. Many other men who became involved with her experienced financial ruin, professional disgrace, or even early death. Montez was a textbook example of an infector, spreading instability wherever she went. Greene explains that infectors tend to present themselves as victims of circumstances, making it difficult to recognize their destructive nature at first. They seek sympathy, appearing to be in need of help or rescue. Yet, those who try to help them often find themselves ensnared, their own fortunes and well-being deteriorating in the process. The lesson is clear: one must quarantine themselves from those who radiate misfortune and negativity. On the flip side, happiness and success are also contagious. Just as associating with miserable people can bring about misfortune, surrounding oneself with positive, competent, and successful individuals can elevate one's own status and mindset. Greene urges readers to make a habit of identifying those who bring fortune and those who bring failure, and to align themselves accordingly. Associating with people who exude positivity, intelligence, and ambition can create a beneficial form of emotional osmosis, helping to cultivate a mindset of growth and resilience. Law 11. Learn to keep people dependent on you. Greene states that power comes not from independence, but from making others dependent on you. The more people rely on you for their success, stability, or survival, the more control you wield over them. The most powerful figures in history understood this principle and positioned themselves as indispensable to those in authority. A prime historical example is Otto von Bismarck, the Prussian statesman who manipulated his rulers into dependency. Bismarck worked under two kings, Frederick William IV and Wilhelm I, both of whom initially distrusted him. However, he made himself essential by expertly handling military and political affairs, ensuring that neither king could govern effectively without him. Over time, he amassed so much influence that he was the true power behind the throne. His masters were technically above him, yet they had no choice but to follow his lead. Greene highlights that those who are too competent and independent often find themselves eliminated because they become expendable. Instead of striving for total self-sufficiency, one should entangle others in their web of influence. The best way to do this is by providing something others cannot easily replace, whether it be knowledge, skills, or strategic alliances. For instance, a skilled advisor who holds critical intelligence about a leader's operations will always be protected, as removing them would cause turmoil. Similarly, a business person who monopolizes a key supply chain makes it nearly impossible for their partners to cut them out. However, Greene cautions that being indispensable does not mean being loved. Masters and employers may grow resentful towards someone they rely on, yet they will hesitate to get rid of them out of fear of disruption. Thus, rather than seeking affection, one should cultivate a position where others simply cannot function without them. The goal is not just to hold power, but to make it impossible for others to take it away without harming themselves in the process. Law 12. Use selective honesty and generosity to disarm your victim. Greene argues that a well-timed act of honesty or generosity can be the perfect tool for deception. Humans are naturally suspicious of those they do not know, especially when dealing with power struggles or negotiations. However, when someone appears unexpectedly open, sincere, or generous, they create a false sense of trust that lowers the guard of their target. By offering a small act of honesty or kindness, one can pave the way for a much larger act of manipulation. A legendary example of this strategy is Victor Lustig, the conman who swindled Al Capone. Lustig approached Capone with a proposition, claiming he needed an investment of $50,000 for a seemingly legitimate deal. Instead of stealing the money, Lustig returned it to Capone 2 months later, saying the deal had fallen through and that he wanted to maintain his honesty. Capone, shocked by Lustig's unexpected integrity, saw him as a rare and trustworthy man. Having completely disarmed Capone's suspicions, Lustig later manipulated him into a separate con, walking away with a significant sum of money. His initial act of selective honesty gave him access to Capone's trust, making his later deception seamless. Greene illustrates how this principle extends beyond deception into warfare and politics. He recounts the famous story of the Trojan horse, a seemingly generous gift from the Greeks to the Trojans that ultimately led to the destruction of Troy. The Greeks could not breach the city walls through direct force, so they used generosity as a weapon, offering the wooden horse as a gift. The Trojans, believing in the sincerity of the offering, let their guard down and brought the horse inside. This mistake sealed their fate, proving that when generosity appears too good to be true, it often is. Greene advises that this tactic is most effective when used at the beginning of a relationship. A single honest gesture or gift creates a long-lasting impression, making the target less likely to suspect ulterior motives. Once a person believes in someone's honesty, they become blind to later manipulations. Selective honesty is not about being truthful. It is about using truth strategically to achieve greater deception. Law 13. When asking for help, appeal to people's self-interest, never to their mercy or gratitude. Robert Greene emphasizes that when seeking assistance, one should never rely on appeals to gratitude or past favors. Instead, the most effective way to secure support is by aligning one's request with the self-interest of the other party. Humans are naturally motivated by what benefits them, and history has shown that pragmatic appeals yield far greater success than moral or emotional arguments. A historical example of this principle comes from the Peloponnesian War, where the city of Corcyra sought an alliance with Athens. The Corcyrans could have reminded Athens of past relationships or made emotional pleas for aid. Instead, they focused solely on what Athens would gain from the alliance, framing their request as a strategic move against their common enemies. This pragmatic approach worked, as Athens recognized that supporting Corcyra was in its best interest, leading to a strong military alliance. Greene contrasts this with those who rely on past goodwill, warning that powerful individuals often dismiss gratitude as a weak currency. A person who expects repayment for past favors will be disappointed when those in power ignore their pleas. The more effective approach is to offer something tangible, whether it be wealth, influence, or strategic advantage. This concept was also demonstrated by Genghis Khan, who was initially inclined to destroy China entirely, seeing no value in its existence. However, his advisor Yelu Chutsai convinced him that instead of razing Chinese cities, he could tax them and reap immense wealth. Chutsai did not beg for mercy on behalf of the Chinese. He simply presented a compelling financial argument. As a result, China was spared, and Khan's empire became even richer. Greene advises that when making a request, one should study their target carefully. What motivates them? Is it wealth, power, legacy, or influence? The appeal must be tailored to what drives them personally. Those who master this technique will find that doors open more easily, as people willingly offer their help, not out of kindness, but out of self-interest. Law 14. Pose as a friend, work as a spy. Greene asserts that information is one of the most valuable weapons in the pursuit of power. Those who control information control decisions, outcomes, and even their adversaries. While spying directly can be risky, the most effective method is to pose as a friend, gaining trust and extracting valuable insights through casual interactions. One of the greatest masters of this technique was Talleyrand, the French diplomat, who was known for his ability to extract secrets from others without them realizing it. He rarely spoke about himself, but encouraged others to share their thoughts freely. By appearing disinterested and engaging in lighthearted conversation, he made people comfortable enough to reveal their true motives and weaknesses. Another historical example is the British counterintelligence operation during World War II, which fed false information to German spies who believed they were operating successfully in England. The Nazis relied on these agents, unknowingly basing their attacks on misinformation. This deception significantly weakened Germany's war strategy and led to numerous failed operations. Greene advises that one should ask indirect questions, observe reactions, and let others speak freely. Many people enjoy talking about themselves and their ambitions, providing ample opportunities to uncover valuable information. At the same time, one must guard against being spied upon. Disinformation is a crucial countermeasure. By deliberately spreading false or misleading details, one can manipulate their enemies into making costly mistakes. However, Greene warns that excessive espionage can lead to suspicion. If people realize they are being pried for information, they will become guarded and mistrustful. The key is to blend in naturally, gather insights without arousing suspicion, and use the knowledge gained strategically. By mastering the art of subtle intelligence gathering, one can always stay several steps ahead of their rivals. Law 15. Crush your enemy totally. Greene's 15th law is one of absolute domination. He argues that half measures in dealing with enemies lead to future retaliation. The only way to secure lasting power is to eliminate one's enemies completely, leaving no room for recovery or revenge. Those who stop short of total destruction allow their enemies to regroup and strike back. A historical example is the story of Mao Zedong's rise to power in China. In the early years of the communist struggle, Mao's forces were nearly wiped out by Chiang Kai-shek's nationalist army. Chiang, believing Mao was no longer a threat, shifted focus to fighting the Japanese instead. This was a fatal mistake. Mao used this breathing room to rebuild his forces, and within a decade, he had crushed Chiang completely, forcing him to flee to Taiwan. Had Chiang finished the communists when he had the chance, the entire history of China might have been different. This law is deeply rooted in military strategy, famously codified by Karl von Clausewitz, the Prussian general who stated that a victorious army must never pause after a major win. It must push forward and completely eliminate any remaining threats. Greene warns that negotiating with a weakened enemy is dangerous, as they will harbor resentment and seek revenge. One of the most ancient examples of this philosophy is found in the Bible's account of Moses. After leading the Israelites through the Red Sea, Moses ensured that every last Egyptian pursuing them was drowned, leaving no survivors. Similarly, when he returned from Mount Sinai and found his people worshiping a golden calf, he ordered the execution of every idolater, preventing future rebellion. This brutal but decisive action ensured complete dominance. Greene explains that this law applies far beyond warfare. In politics, business, and personal rivalries, those who leave enemies with even the smallest hope of revenge will eventually face retaliation. Ruthlessness in victory ensures security. Once an enemy has been defeated, they must be financially, politically, or socially destroyed. Leaving them with any path to resurgence is an invitation for future conflict. However, Greene cautions that crushing an enemy should not be done recklessly or emotionally. The most successful power players eliminate threats systematically and quietly to avoid creating unnecessary new enemies. The ultimate goal is not destruction for its own sake, but the complete removal of obstacles to power. The core lesson of this law is clear. Mercy is often mistaken for weakness, and unfinished conflicts will always return to haunt you. A true power player knows that when it comes to enemies, the safest course is total eradication. Law 16. Use absence to increase respect and honor. Robert Greene explains that too much availability can diminish a person's value. When someone is constantly seen and heard, they become too familiar, and familiarity breeds contempt. The more one is present, the less people appreciate them. However, by strategically withdrawing, a person can create an aura of mystery and desirability, making others long for their return. Absence increases value by making people crave what they no longer have. A historical example of this principle is Charles V, Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, who at the height of his power unexpectedly retired to a monastery in 1557. His sudden withdrawal from public life stunned the world. Many who had once feared and hated him suddenly admired him, and he was even seen as a saint. Similarly, actress Greta Garbo, who retired from Hollywood at the peak of her career in 1941, maintained her mystique by avoiding the public eye, ensuring that her legend only grew. Greene stresses that in personal relationships, love, and leadership, creating scarcity enhances one's value. In the realm of romance, overexposure can weaken attraction. The 17th-century French courtesan Ninon de l'Enclos advised lovers to withdraw from time to time to keep desire alive, stating that love never dies of starvation, but often of indigestion. The moment a person becomes too available, they are taken for granted. However, Greene warns that absence should be used strategically. If a person disappears too soon, before establishing their importance, they risk being forgotten altogether. This law applies most effectively after one has already built a strong presence. In the beginning stages of a career, relationship, or position of influence, one must be omnipresent to establish authority. Only once influence is secured should withdrawal be used to heighten mystique and reinforce power. Law 17. Keep others in suspended terror. Cultivate an air of unpredictability. Robert Greene emphasizes that predictability is a weakness because it makes a person easy to control. Humans crave routine and familiarity, and when they can predict someone's behavior, they feel comfortable. However, deliberate unpredictability disrupts this comfort, keeping others on edge and uncertain of one's next move. This psychological advantage can create fear, respect, and strategic confusion. A striking example is Bobby Fischer, the chess grandmaster, who employed unpredictability as a weapon. Before his 1972 World Chess Championship match against Boris Spassky, Fischer created chaos by delaying his arrival, making outrageous demands, and keeping everyone guessing whether he would even show up. His erratic behavior disturbed Spassky's concentration, making him uneasy before the game even began. When Fischer finally arrived, he continued to disrupt Spassky's rhythm by playing unconventional moves and breaking patterns, causing Spassky to crumble under the pressure. In warfare, unpredictability has long been a powerful tactic. General Stonewall Jackson during the American Civil War repeatedly changed his movements and strategies so erratically that the Union generals were left confused and hesitant, allowing his outnumbered forces to succeed. Muhammad Ali used this principle in boxing, famously confusing his opponents by switching styles mid-fight. Against George Foreman in the 1974 Rumble in the Jungle, Ali broke his usual dancing style and instead stood toe-to-toe with Foreman, exhausting him before delivering the final knockout punch. Greene warns that while unpredictability can be an excellent tool for keeping adversaries off balance, it must be used with caution. Excessive unpredictability, especially for those in a subordinate position, can make a person seem unreliable, unstable, or even insane. When used correctly, however, it turns a person into a force that cannot be easily countered, keeping opponents perpetually on the defensive. Law 18. Do not build fortresses to protect yourself. Isolation is dangerous. Greene warns against the instinct to retreat into isolation for protection. While building physical or metaphorical fortresses may seem like a safe option, isolation actually increases vulnerability. The world is a social battlefield, and cutting oneself off from it results in loss of information, weakened influence, and a lack of support. Power is best maintained by staying connected, moving through different social circles, and keeping allies close. A historical cautionary tale is the fate of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. Obsessed with security, he lived in secrecy, constantly moving through underground passageways to avoid assassination. His paranoia led him to kill anyone who accidentally saw him. However, his extreme isolation also meant that when he died, his ministers kept his death a secret, fearing political instability. His isolation had made him powerful, but in the end it cut him off from reality, and his empire crumbled shortly after his death. The alternative to isolation is strategic mingling. Louis XIV, the Sun King of France, maintained his power by constantly engaging with his court at Versailles. By making himself the center of attention, he ensured that all political dealings revolved around him. In contrast, leaders who isolate themselves create resentment and lose the ability to influence others. Greene explains that power thrives on information, alliances, and maneuverability. When a person isolates themselves, they lose touch with what is happening in their environment. Worse, isolation can create paranoia, as those who are cut off tend to exaggerate threats, making them easy targets. The most powerful figures stay socially active, adaptable, and constantly aware of shifting dynamics. A fortress, whether physical, mental, or emotional, only offers an illusion of safety, while in reality, it creates stagnation, weakness, and eventual downfall. Law 19. Know who you're dealing with. Do not offend the wrong person. Robert Greene emphasizes that one of the most critical skills in the pursuit of power is the ability to accurately judge people. Not everyone reacts to situations in the same way, and offending the wrong individual can have devastating consequences. Some people are quick to forgive, while others will hold a grudge for life, seeking revenge when least expected. Underestimating someone's potential for retaliation is a dangerous mistake that has led to the downfall of many. One of the most infamous historical examples of this principle is the story of Aguirre, the madman of the Andes. A Spanish conquistador, Aguirre was slighted early in his career when he was flogged for a minor offense. Though he appeared to accept the punishment, he never forgot the humiliation. Over the years, he built up a deep resentment and methodically eliminated anyone he believed had wronged him. His vengeance was so relentless that he eventually led a rebellion against the Spanish crown, killing numerous high-ranking officials along the way. His story serves as a warning. Never assume that someone will simply accept mistreatment. Some people will dedicate their entire lives to seeking revenge. Greene explains that individuals generally fall into different psychological categories, each requiring a unique approach. Some people are insecure and fragile, and even a minor slight can push them into destructive retaliation. Others are prideful and will go to extreme lengths to restore their honor. Then there are the calculating types who may pretend to forgive, but will wait years to strike back when least expected. The most dangerous enemies are those who disguise their true nature. A seemingly harmless person can turn into a formidable adversary if provoked. The lesson is clear. Before making a move, one must carefully assess the personality and temperament of those involved. It is often better to be cautious, to avoid unnecessary insults, and to treat people with calculated respect, even if one does not genuinely like them. A single thoughtless insult can create an enemy for life, whereas strategic diplomacy can prevent unnecessary conflicts. Power lies in the ability to anticipate reactions and to choose battles wisely. Law 20. Do not commit to anyone. Greene argues that power belongs to those who remain unattached, playing multiple sides while committing to none. Once a person binds themselves to a single cause, leader, or group, they become predictable and lose leverage. Instead, true power comes from keeping all parties uncertain, maintaining an aura of desirability, and allowing others to fight for one's allegiance. One of the greatest practitioners of this law was Queen Elizabeth I of England. Throughout her reign, she skillfully avoided marriage, even though countless suitors, including the King of Spain and the Duke of Anjou, vied for her hand. By keeping them in suspense, she ensured that foreign powers continued to seek England's favor, preventing them from forming alliances against her. Had she committed to any one suitor, she would have lost this advantage and risked embroiling England in unnecessary conflicts. Her lifelong refusal to commit kept her kingdom independent and solidified her image as the Virgin Queen, an almost divine figure beyond reach. Another historical example is Alcibiades, the Athenian general who played Athens, Sparta, and Persia against one another. He continuously switched sides, always ensuring that he remained indispensable to all. Each faction wanted his support, and by never fully committing, he always held the upper hand. Similarly, Henry Kissinger maneuvered between political factions, advising both Nixon and his opponents, ensuring that no matter who gained power, he would always be relevant. Greene explains that commitment is often used as a tool of manipulation. People will try to trap others into alliances through favors, obligations, and emotional appeals. However, once commitment is given, one's power diminishes, as they are now bound by loyalty rather than strategy. The key to maintaining influence is to appear open to commitment while never fully surrendering one's independence. This keeps all parties interested and increases one's perceived value. While refusing to commit can be an effective strategy, Greene warns that it must be executed carefully. If one plays too many sides at once, they risk being seen as unreliable or deceitful, which can lead to being cast out altogether. The best approach is to create the illusion of potential commitment while always retaining the ability to walk away. Power comes from remaining the pursued rather than the pursuer. Law 21. Play a sucker to catch a sucker. Seem dumber than your mark. Greene explains that people hate feeling inferior, and nothing provokes resentment more than someone who appears intellectually or strategically superior. The best way to manipulate others is to let them believe they are in control, while subtly steering them in the desired direction. By pretending to be less intelligent, naive, or easily deceived, one can lull opponents into overconfidence, leading them into traps. A historical example of this tactic is the American con artist Joseph "Yellow Kid" Weil. Weil was known for scamming the wealthy, yet he never approached them with an air of superiority. Instead, he played the role of an unsophisticated, bumbling businessman, someone who seemed like easy prey. Wealthy investors, believing they were taking advantage of him, eagerly engaged in his schemes, only to later realize that he had outmaneuvered them entirely. Weil's ability to appear dumber than his victims made them underestimate him, making them easy to deceive. Another example comes from Asbury Harpending, a financier who was tricked into believing in a fake diamond mine in the American West. The swindlers behind the con pretended to be ignorant prospectors, seemingly unaware of the value of their discovery. Harpending, thinking he was exploiting their naivete, invested millions, only to later discover the entire scheme was an illusion. His own arrogance and belief in his superior intelligence had been his downfall. Greene highlights that the best tricksters and power players in history have understood that letting others feel superior is the ultimate act of control. When people think they are outsmarting someone, their guard is down, making them easier to influence. By adopting the guise of a fool, one can extract valuable information, deflect suspicion, and orchestrate events without attracting hostility. However, Greene warns that one must not take this strategy too far. Appearing too foolish can lead to actual loss of respect, making others dismissive rather than overconfident. The key is to find a balance, seeming just incompetent enough that others feel comfortable, but never so much that one is completely disregarded. This allows for the perfect blend of deception and control, where one's true intelligence is hidden behind a carefully crafted illusion. Law 22. Use the surrender tactic. Transform weakness into power. Robert Greene explains that when facing a more powerful opponent, direct resistance often leads to defeat. Instead of engaging in a futile struggle, it is wiser to surrender strategically, using submission as a tool to gain time, study the opponent, and ultimately reclaim power. Those who surrender do not necessarily lose. Rather, they position themselves for a more effective counterattack when the time is right. A famous historical example is King Gujian of Yue. After his kingdom was defeated by the neighboring state of Wu, Gujian chose not to resist, but instead surrendered himself as a servant to the victorious king. For years, he humiliated himself, working as a stable boy and enduring hardship. Wu's ruler eventually let his guard down, believing Gujian to be harmless. However, once Gujian was free, he meticulously rebuilt his army, and when Wu was at its weakest, launched a devastating attack, reclaiming his throne and destroying his enemy. His apparent surrender had given him the perfect opportunity for revenge. Greene highlights that surrender is not a sign of weakness, but a tactical maneuver. Fighting a battle one cannot win is foolish. Instead, one should bend like the willow tree, surviving the storm while the rigid oak is uprooted. Surrender allows an individual to remain in the game, gradually undermining their enemy from within. Even in situations where surrender appears humiliating, it can be an illusion, one that ultimately confuses and destabilizes the victor. Greene also provides modern applications of this tactic. When Japan was confronted by Western powers in the 19th century, it outwardly accepted foreign influence, embracing Western technologies and customs. However, this was merely a facade. Behind the scenes, Japan rapidly modernized its military and economy, ensuring that it would one day surpass its supposed masters. By the time Japan revealed its true strength, it was already an imperial power in its own right. The key takeaway is that power is fluid. If one finds themselves in a position of weakness, resisting blindly is a mistake. Instead, submission can be a calculated move, a way to lull the enemy into complacency. Once the enemy assumes victory, their guard drops, and that is when the real battle begins. Law 23. Concentrate your forces. Greene argues that power is best cultivated through intense focus, rather than through scattered efforts. Many individuals and organizations fail because they spread their resources too thin, attempting to be everywhere at once rather than dominating one area completely. True power comes from identifying a single, rich target, whether it be a key patron, an industry, or a strategic goal, and pursuing it relentlessly. One of the most striking examples of this law in action is the Rothschild banking dynasty. Unlike other wealthy families who sought to diversify their efforts across different ventures, the Rothschilds focused exclusively on finance. By concentrating their forces, they built an empire that outlasted their rivals. Their philosophy was simple: we are like the mechanism of a watch. Each part is essential. By maintaining focus and unity, they ensured that their influence was unbreakable. Another key figure who exemplified this principle was Napoleon Bonaparte. His military successes were largely due to his unwavering focus on the enemy's weakest points. While other generals spread their armies across multiple fronts, Napoleon concentrated his forces in one decisive location, overwhelming his adversaries with sheer intensity. Greene explains that this same principle applies beyond warfare. Whether in business, politics, or personal ambition, the individual who concentrates their energy in a single direction will always outperform the one who is distracted by multiple pursuits. However, Greene also warns of the dangers of diffusion. Many fail because they try to please too many people, follow too many trends, or pursue too many ventures at once. He gives the example of Nikola Tesla, a brilliant scientist who refused to tie himself to a single patron. Unlike his rival Thomas Edison, who had powerful financial backers, Tesla remained independent and suffered because of it. By failing to concentrate his forces on a single strong source of support, he was constantly struggling to fund his ideas, while Edison flourished. Greene concludes that intensity beats extensity every time. In a world where distraction is rampant, those who master single-minded focus have an unparalleled advantage. Whether in business, politics, or personal development, the lesson is clear: find your battlefield, commit to it fully, and dominate it before expanding further. Law 24. Play the perfect courtier. The world of power operates much like the royal courts of old, where survival depended not just on skill, but on the ability to navigate complex social hierarchies. Greene explains that the perfect courtier masters the art of influence using charm, discretion, and strategic flattery to advance their position without making enemies. Throughout history, courtiers have wielded immense influence, often surpassing even the rulers they served. One such example was Talleyrand, Napoleon's chief diplomat. While Napoleon was a brute force strategist, Talleyrand relied on subtle manipulation, knowing when to yield, when to flatter, and when to strike. Despite serving under multiple regimes, he always emerged unscathed, proving that political dexterity is more powerful than brute strength. Greene outlines the key traits of the perfect courtier. First, they understand that appearances are everything. Powerful people are often driven by ego, and the best courtiers make their masters feel superior while secretly controlling them. Second, they excel in the art of indirect influence. Rather than issuing commands, they guide decisions through suggestions, insinuations, and careful phrasing. Finally, they never outshine their master. A courtier's power comes from serving without threatening, allowing them to remain indispensable without becoming a target. One of the most dangerous aspects of court life is envy. Those who rise too quickly often attract resentment, making them vulnerable to attack. The best courtiers, Greene explains, deflect envy by being generous with praise, ensuring that others see them as allies rather than threats. Renaissance artists like Leonardo da Vinci mastered this art, always maintaining an air of humility while securing powerful patrons. In modern times, court society still exists in politics, corporations, and even social circles. Those who fail to grasp this reality often become victims of office politics, power struggles, and betrayals. Greene emphasizes that to survive and thrive in any power structure, one must embrace the role of the courtier. Rather than resisting the game, one should learn to play it better than everyone else. The ultimate lesson of this law is that power does not always go to the most talented or the hardest worker. It goes to those who understand the delicate dance of influence, persuasion, and strategic humility. By mastering the subtle arts of flattery, discretion, and controlled visibility, one can rise to any position of power without ever seeming like a threat. Law 25. Recreate yourself. Robert Greene argues that to achieve power, one must not accept the identity that society imposes, but instead actively shape their own image. Power lies in the ability to reinvent oneself, crafting an identity that commands attention and influence. Rather than being limited by past roles or expectations, powerful individuals master the art of transformation. One of the key historical examples Greene provides is Julius Caesar, who carefully curated his public image to establish dominance in Roman society. When Caesar first entered the political scene, he did not rely solely on his military achievements, but crafted an aura of grandeur, throwing lavish games and public events to win the hearts of the Roman people. By controlling how others perceived him, he gained power beyond his official title. Similarly, P.T. Barnum, the legendary showman, continually reinvented himself, ensuring that the public never grew tired of his persona. He understood that stagnation is the enemy of power. To maintain influence, one must always remain dynamic and intriguing. Greene also discusses the importance of theatricality in self-reinvention. Powerful figures often adopt dramatic gestures and symbolic actions to enhance their aura. Napoleon Bonaparte, for instance, created a carefully curated image of himself as a larger-than-life figure, from the way he posed in portraits to the way he structured his public appearances. These tactics made him more than just a military leader. They made him a legend. However, Greene warns that recreating oneself is not about deception, but about controlling perception. Those who fail to take charge of their own narrative risk being defined by others, which can lead to a loss of power. By understanding this law, one can shape their destiny, crafting an identity that commands respect, influence, and ultimately, power. Law 26. Keep your hands clean. Greene explains that to maintain power, one must appear beyond reproach. Powerful individuals often commit unethical or ruthless acts, but they do so indirectly, ensuring that the blame falls on others. A spotless reputation is crucial, as any association with scandal or wrongdoing can lead to downfall. The key is to use scapegoats and proxies while maintaining an image of integrity. A classic example is Cao Cao, the great Chinese general. During a military campaign, his army was running low on food, and the soldiers began grumbling about starvation. To prevent a mutiny, Cao Cao ordered the execution of the chief of supplies, making him the scapegoat for the food shortage. The soldiers, believing that justice had been served, stopped complaining. By shifting blame, Cao Cao preserved his authority without tarnishing his image. Another historical example is Louis XIV of France, who mastered the art of delegating dirty work to subordinates. Whenever an unpopular decision had to be made, such as raising taxes or punishing nobles, he ensured that his ministers took the blame. Meanwhile, he maintained his image as a benevolent ruler, allowing him to retain the loyalty of the French people. Greene emphasizes that even the most ruthless leaders must appear virtuous. The moment one's hands are visibly stained, they become vulnerable to attack. Many powerful figures use intermediaries, lawyers, advisors, or subordinates to carry out their plans while they remain detached. This tactic is particularly evident in modern politics and business, where leaders often distance themselves from controversial decisions, allowing fall guys to take the blame. However, Greene warns that using scapegoats excessively can lead to backlash. If a leader is too quick to sacrifice others, people may begin to see through the manipulation. The key is to balance appearances, ensuring that one remains untouchable while subtly guiding events from behind the scenes. Law 27. Play on people's need to believe to create a cult-like following. Greene asserts that people have a deep psychological need to believe in something greater than themselves. Those who recognize this can wield immense power by offering a vision, ideology, or cause that captures people's devotion. Whether in religion, politics, or business, the most successful leaders create movements that inspire loyalty, obedience, and even fanaticism. One of the most powerful historical examples is Rasputin, the infamous Russian mystic. He positioned himself as a holy man with divine insight, cultivating a mysterious aura that made people believe in his supernatural abilities. By carefully mixing charisma with strategic ambiguity, he drew followers into his orbit, ensuring that they saw him as indispensable. His ability to manipulate belief allowed him to exert control over the Russian royal family. Another example is Adolf Hitler, who built the Nazi movement by appealing to people's need for purpose and identity. His speeches were filled with grand promises, emotional appeals, and calls to action, drawing desperate people into his ideology. By creating rituals, symbols, and an us versus them mentality, he transformed ordinary individuals into zealous followers. This demonstrates how a leader can harness belief to gain absolute control. Greene explains that to create a cult-like following, one must keep messages vague but full of promise. Instead of offering clear, rational solutions, leaders should emphasize emotions, symbols, and aspirational goals. This approach allows followers to project their own hopes onto the leader, strengthening their emotional attachment. Cult leaders, religious figures, and even corporate CEOs use this technique to build unwavering loyalty. A crucial part of this law is demanding sacrifices from followers. The more people invest in a movement, whether through money, time, or personal commitment, the harder it becomes for them to abandon it. This psychological phenomenon, known as the sunk cost fallacy, ensures that people remain devoted even when evidence suggests they should walk away. Greene warns that this law can be used for both positive and destructive purposes. While some leaders create genuine, uplifting movements, others exploit belief for selfish gain. The most powerful figures recognize that logic alone does not inspire devotion. Faith, emotion, and identity do. Those who understand how to manipulate belief can shape reality itself, commanding the loyalty, obedience, and sacrifice of their followers. Law 28. Enter action with boldness. Hesitation and timidity are dangerous when it comes to achieving power. If one is uncertain of an action, it is often better not to attempt it at all. The moment doubt creeps in, it infects execution and weakens authority. Boldness, on the other hand, is admired and often rewarded, while timidity invites attacks and exploitation. Greene argues that any mistakes committed through audacity are far easier to correct than those caused by hesitation. Throughout history, bold individuals have stood out and commanded respect, even when their actions were reckless or impetuous. Napoleon Bonaparte, for instance, understood that decisive action kept people in awe and prevented them from questioning his authority. In contrast, those who proceed too cautiously or second-guess themselves expose their weaknesses and open themselves to scrutiny and doubt from others. The key to boldness is cultivating an air of confidence, even when one feels uncertain. Those who appear sure of themselves are often mistaken for being truly competent, and their confidence intimidates others into submission. This is not to say that boldness should be reckless. Rather, it should be calculated and strategic. Even when faced with setbacks, a bold person doubles down, refusing to retreat in fear. This is evident in figures like Julius Caesar, who, rather than hesitating at the Rubicon, crossed it decisively, signaling his intent to seize power. Greene emphasizes that the world belongs to the bold because they shape reality rather than being shaped by it. The chapter warns against half measures, as they lead to mediocre results and encourage opposition. If one is to move forward, it must be done with full commitment and fearless determination. Those who strike first and with confidence set the terms of engagement, forcing others to react rather than dictate the course of events. However, boldness should not be confused with overconfidence, which can be a weakness if unchecked. The best strategy is to balance boldness with preparation, ensuring that confidence is backed by substance. Greene's final lesson in this law is clear. Those who enter action with boldness dictate their own fate, while the timid are left to suffer the consequences of their hesitation. Law 29. Plan all the way to the end. Success in power requires foresight. Greene warns that those who act impulsively or without a clear long-term plan will find themselves at the mercy of unforeseen obstacles and consequences. Many people fall into the trap of celebrating early victories or getting caught up in the moment without considering the potential ramifications of their actions. To avoid this, one must plan meticulously, taking into account every possible outcome and being prepared for twists of fate that could derail progress. By planning all the way to the end, one retains control and ensures that success is not left to chance. History is filled with examples of individuals who failed because they did not think ahead. One of the most famous cases is that of Napoleon, who, despite being a master strategist, failed to anticipate the consequences of his invasion of Russia. His lack of foresight regarding the Russian winter and the long supply lines ultimately led to his downfall. On the other hand, great leaders like Otto von Bismarck meticulously planned every step of their political maneuvering, ensuring that they always maintained control over the outcomes of their actions. Greene also emphasizes that planning is not just about strategy, but also about timing. Knowing when to stop is just as important as knowing when to act. Many people ruin their success by pushing too far, failing to recognize when they have achieved enough. In power, knowing when to exit gracefully or consolidate one's gains is crucial. Those who fail to see the endgame often fall victim to overreaching, leaving themselves vulnerable. A crucial element of planning is the ability to predict obstacles and adapt when necessary. Greene argues that those who control the narrative of their actions by anticipating problems can manipulate events in their favor. By contrast, those who act rashly are often caught off guard and become reactive rather than proactive. He urges individuals to adopt the mindset of a chess player, always thinking several moves ahead and considering how their actions will play out in the grand scheme of things. By planning to the end, one ensures that power is not only attained, but also sustained. Law 30. Make your accomplishments seem effortless. The appearance of ease is a powerful tool in the realm of influence and control. Greene argues that true mastery involves concealing the effort behind one's accomplishments, making success appear effortless. When people see struggle, they tend to judge an achievement as less impressive, associating difficulty with lack of skill. However, when a person makes something seem easy, they create an aura of superiority and natural ability that others admire and often fear. The importance of effortlessness can be seen in the world of entertainment, sports, and leadership. For example, the great magician Harry Houdini was known for his ability to escape from seemingly impossible traps, making it appear as though he performed his feats with little effort. In reality, he practiced tirelessly and meticulously planned every detail of his acts. However, he never let the audience see the struggle. The same principle applies to powerful individuals. Those who move gracefully and with composure exude an air of control, while those who appear frantic or burdened by their responsibilities seem weak. Greene warns against the temptation to reveal the hard work and struggle behind success. Many people seek validation and admiration by explaining how much effort went into their accomplishments, but this often backfires. Instead of admiration, it can provoke envy, resentment, or a belief that anyone could achieve the same results with enough effort. This is why truly powerful people remain discreet about their methods, letting their achievements speak for themselves. At the same time, secrecy should not become paranoia. If one appears overly secretive, it can make others suspicious or lead them to believe that there is deception at play. Greene highlights the example of P.T. Barnum, who, despite being a master showman, occasionally revealed some of his tricks to his audience. By doing so in a controlled manner, he gave people just enough insight to feel involved while still maintaining an air of mystery. The reversal of this law suggests that, in some cases, revealing a little bit of the struggle can be beneficial. This depends on the audience. Some people appreciate being let in on the process, as it makes them feel connected. However, this must be done with careful calculation, ensuring that the revelation enhances one's mystique rather than diminishing it. Ultimately, the goal is to make accomplishments seem effortless while maintaining an air of mystery and control. Law 31. Control the options. Get others to play with the cards you deal. The key to true power lies not in outright domination, but in the subtle manipulation of choices. Greene argues that the most powerful individuals do not force others into submission, but instead guide them into a predetermined set of choices, making them believe they are acting of their own free will. This illusion of autonomy is crucial, as people resist overt coercion, but will readily accept an outcome they perceive as their own decision. By setting up scenarios where every available option benefits oneself, the person in control remains unchallenged, while those they manipulate feel empowered. History is replete with examples of leaders, rulers, and strategists who mastered this tactic. The most effective leaders create dilemmas in which no matter what choice is made, they gain the upper hand. A historical example of this is Franklin D. Roosevelt, who, when faced with a divided Democratic Party, offered multiple cabinet positions to different factions, ensuring that no single group could claim dominance while also binding them to his leadership. Another case is the classic political strategy of offering an opponent a choice between two unfavorable options, forcing them to select what is ultimately the lesser evil, but still within the parameters set by the manipulator. Greene stresses that presenting people with too many choices can lead to hesitation and uncertainty, which is counterproductive to control. Instead, the most effective strategy is to limit choices to a manageable set, subtly steering people toward the most desirable outcome. This can be seen in marketing and advertising, where companies create an illusion of variety while ensuring that all options lead back to their brand or product. The principle extends to social and political maneuvering, where one can direct negotiations, alliances, and power plays by controlling what options are available. The key to this law is to create the perception that the other party is making a free and independent choice when, in reality, they are selecting from prearranged options designed to benefit the strategist. This principle is widely used in diplomacy, negotiations, and even interpersonal relationships. By learning how to frame options and steer conversations in a way that limits unpredictability, one can maintain dominance without appearing forceful. In the end, Greene asserts, true power lies not in controlling people directly, but in controlling the choices they believe they have. Law 32. Play to people's fantasies. The harsh reality of life is often filled with disappointment, struggle, and unfulfilled desires. Greene argues that those who can craft and sell fantasies hold immense power because people are naturally drawn to illusions that provide them with escape and hope. Truth can be harsh and unsettling, leading to resistance, while fantasy is enticing and comforting, making it easier to control and influence others. Those who can create compelling narratives, grand visions, or utopian ideals can gather a devoted following and command loyalty in ways that logic and reason never could. History and society are filled with figures who have successfully wielded the power of fantasy. Leaders, religious figures, and even con artists have long understood that people will readily believe in a dream rather than confront an uncomfortable reality. This was evident in the rise of charismatic leaders who promised revolutionary change, even if their plans were unrealistic or vague. People flock to those who can construct a compelling vision of the future, whether it is a promised land, a golden age, or a return to lost glory. One of the most powerful applications of this law is found in entertainment, advertising, and politics. The entertainment industry thrives on the ability to craft narratives that captivate and transport audiences. Politicians use slogans, symbols, and speeches to invoke emotions and dreams, making their followers believe in a cause beyond their personal struggles. Even in business, brands that successfully create an aspirational image, whether through luxury products or a lifestyle promise, gain immense loyalty from consumers. Greene warns, however, that playing to fantasies is a double-edged sword. While it can build immense influence, it also creates expectations that must be maintained. The danger lies in overpromising or failing to sustain the illusion. Those who build their power on fantasy must carefully balance deception with spectacle, ensuring that the illusion remains intact while avoiding scrutiny or exposure. A critical mistake would be allowing the fantasy to collapse or failing to deliver enough substance to maintain belief. In the end, Greene asserts that people will always prefer a beautifully crafted illusion over a harsh truth. The most effective wielders of power understand how to use fantasy as a tool, keeping people enchanted and engaged while subtly directing their thoughts and actions. By mastering the art of illusion, one can gain influence over the hearts and minds of others, ensuring loyalty and devotion that logic alone could never achieve. Law 33. Discover each man's thumbscrew. Every person has a weakness, a vulnerability that once identified can be exploited to exert control over them. Greene compares this weakness to a thumbscrew, a pressure point that, when turned, forces compliance or submission. The key to power lies in discovering what drives people, what they fear, what they desire most, and what they cannot resist. Once these vulnerabilities are uncovered, they can be used as leverage to manipulate and dominate. The most common weaknesses people have include insecurity, strong emotional attachments, hidden fears, or deep-seated desires. Some individuals crave validation, while others are ruled by guilt, fear, or unresolved personal conflicts. By carefully observing behavior, listening to what people say and what they avoid saying, and analyzing their reactions, one can pinpoint these vulnerabilities. This knowledge then becomes a powerful tool for control, allowing the manipulator to subtly influence decisions, extract favors, or neutralize opposition. Throughout history, power players have used this principle to great effect. Cardinal Richelieu, for instance, built his influence by uncovering the secret weaknesses of nobles and using them to secure their obedience. He knew their financial troubles, their ambitions, and their personal scandals, ensuring that they had no choice but to align with him. Similarly, intelligence agencies and political figures have long understood that leverage often comes from exploiting personal flaws, whether through blackmail, emotional persuasion, or strategic alliances. Greene provides several methods to uncover a person's thumbscrew. One approach is to look for patterns in their behavior. People often betray their own weaknesses through repeated actions or choices. Another method is to probe through indirect questioning, making them reveal more than they intend. Observing how they respond to different pressures, whether it be flattery, stress, or temptation, can also reveal key vulnerabilities. Once identified, these weaknesses can be used to gain influence, whether through subtle persuasion or more overt coercion. However, Greene warns that this tactic should be used wisely and ethically. While exploiting weaknesses can yield great power, it can also create dangerous enemies if done carelessly. If a person realizes they are being manipulated, they may retaliate with equal force. Therefore, it is often best to use this knowledge discreetly, leveraging it in a way that appears natural rather than forced. The ultimate goal is not just to control others, but to do so without them realizing they are being controlled. In conclusion, discovering and exploiting a person's weaknesses is one of the most effective tools for achieving power. Whether through psychological insight, careful observation, or strategic questioning, those who master this skill can wield tremendous influence over others. However, discretion and subtlety are key. True power lies in making people feel as though they are acting of their own free will, even as they are being guided by an unseen hand. Law 34. Be royal in your own fashion. Act like a king to be treated like one. The perception of power is often just as important as power itself. Greene argues that to command respect and authority, one must carry themselves with an aura of royalty, confidence, and dignity. People tend to judge others based on how they present themselves rather than their actual capabilities. Those who act with self-assurance and expect respect from others are more likely to receive it. This is why kings, emperors, and leaders throughout history have cultivated an air of divinity and superiority, ensuring that others perceive them as being above the common masses. Acting like a king does not mean being arrogant or oppressive, but rather exuding an undeniable presence that makes others believe in one's worth. This concept is deeply embedded in human psychology. People are naturally drawn to those who appear to be above ordinary concerns and struggles. A person who constantly seeks validation or allows themselves to be treated poorly will inevitably be seen as unworthy. However, someone who carries themselves with quiet dignity, unshaken by criticism or external pressures, will naturally draw others into their orbit. Greene provides historical examples to illustrate this principle. Napoleon Bonaparte, despite his humble Corsican origins, projected the image of an emperor long before he officially took the throne. He surrounded himself with the trappings of royalty and ensured that his demeanor reflected absolute confidence. By contrast, Charles I of England clung too rigidly to his divine right of kingship, alienating his subjects and ultimately losing his head. The lesson is clear. One must balance authority with adaptability, knowing when to assert power and when to appear approachable. The strategy of acting like a king also involves refusing to engage in petty conflicts. Those who allow themselves to be dragged into trivial matters diminish their own importance. The truly powerful maintain a sense of mystery, rarely lowering themselves to explain or justify their actions. This self-imposed distance reinforces their status, and makes others more eager to seek their approval. Even in personal interactions, the way one carries themselves determines how they are treated. If a person demands respect through their actions and demeanor, they will receive it. If they seek approval and beg for recognition, they will be dismissed. Greene cautions, however, that this strategy must be applied with nuance. Overplaying the role of royalty can lead to arrogance and isolation, making one an easy target for those eager to bring them down. The goal is to project confidence, not superiority. A truly powerful person knows how to make others feel valued while maintaining an air of authority. In the end, the world will treat a person as they demand to be treated, and those who carry themselves like kings will find themselves surrounded by followers. Law 35. Master the art of timing. Timing is one of the most critical elements of power. Greene emphasizes that knowing when to act and when to wait is what separates the successful from the failed. Rashness leads to mistakes, while excessive hesitation results in missed opportunities. The ability to read the flow of events and strike at the perfect moment ensures that one's actions are effective and impactful. The concept of timing has been understood by great strategists throughout history. A skilled leader does not rush into battle blindly, but waits for the enemy to reveal a weakness. Similarly, in politics and business, those who time their moves correctly, whether it be launching a product, making an announcement, or forming an alliance, often find success. Greene cites the example of Julius Caesar, who understood the importance of biding his time. He waited for the right moment to cross the Rubicon, ensuring that his enemies were unprepared and unable to stop his advance. One of the key aspects of mastering timing is patience. Many people act out of fear, believing that they must seize opportunities immediately or risk losing them. However, the most powerful individuals understand that the right moment is often worth waiting for. They observe, analyze, and prepare, ensuring that when they do act, they do so with precision. By contrast, those who act impulsively often find themselves trapped by circumstances they did not foresee. Greene also discusses the importance of controlling the perception of time. A powerful person can make an opponent feel rushed or uncertain by manipulating the pace of events. By slowing down negotiations, a leader can frustrate and exhaust their opponent, leading them to make concessions they otherwise would not. Conversely, when speed is required, striking quickly can overwhelm an adversary before they have time to react. Another crucial aspect of timing is knowing when to end something. Many people continue fighting battles that should have been abandoned long ago, wasting energy and resources. A master strategist knows when to walk away, consolidate gains, and move on to the next opportunity. This principle applies in relationships, business, and warfare. Those who cling to past conflicts or refuse to recognize when an opportunity has passed often find themselves trapped in failure. Ultimately, Greene asserts that timing is an art that must be cultivated through observation and practice. The world operates on rhythms, and those who can attune themselves to these rhythms will always have the advantage. Whether through patience, swift action, or strategic delay, mastering timing allows one to dictate the flow of events rather than be controlled by them. Law 36. Disdain. Things you cannot have. Ignoring them is the best revenge. Desire is a powerful force, but it can also be a source of weakness. Greene argues that one of the greatest strategies in power is to show disdain for the things one cannot have. Obsession with something that is out of reach only amplifies its importance and gives it power over the mind. By contrast, dismissing what is unattainable robs it of significance, allowing one to maintain control and focus on what can be achieved. Human nature makes people want what they cannot have. This is why forbidden things often seem more attractive, and why people chase after elusive goals even when it is irrational to do so. However, the most powerful individuals understand that showing interest in something that is unavailable only increases its value. Instead of longing for what is out of reach, they redirect their energy elsewhere, maintaining an aura of independence and superiority. Greene illustrates this principle with historical examples. One of the most famous is the story of the fox and the grapes, in which a fox, unable to reach a cluster of grapes, dismisses them as unripe and undesirable. This act of self-deception prevents the fox from feeling inferior or defeated. Similarly, powerful individuals who cannot obtain something, whether it be wealth, status, or a person's favor, often benefit from acting as though they never wanted it in the first place. This not only preserves their dignity, but can also make the desired object lose its appeal. Another key aspect of this law is that ignoring an opponent or an enemy is often more effective than engaging with them. Many conflicts escalate simply because one party refuses to let go of a perceived slight or loss. By showing indifference, a person denies their enemy the satisfaction of a reaction. This is particularly effective in social and political power struggles, where attention is often the true currency. If a rival seeks validation or acknowledgement, refusing to give it can be a devastating form of control. Greene warns that reacting emotionally to every challenge is a sign of weakness. Those who can let go of minor defeats and disappointments maintain their focus and strength. The ability to control one's desires and suppress unnecessary attachments is a hallmark of true power. By mastering the art of indifference, one ensures that they are never controlled by what they lack, but rather defined by what they choose to pursue. Law 37. Create compelling spectacles. Power is not only about strategy, but also about perception. Greene argues that creating grand spectacles and symbolic displays can enhance one's authority and influence. Human beings are deeply visual creatures, and striking imagery or dramatic gestures can captivate an audience in a way that words alone cannot. By crafting spectacles, one can inspire admiration, loyalty, and awe, making people more willing to follow and support a leader. History is filled with examples of leaders and figures who mastered the art of spectacle. Louis XIV of France, known as the Sun King, maintained an extravagant court at Versailles, where he staged elaborate ceremonies, balls, and performances that reinforced his divine right to rule. By ensuring that his public appearances were always larger than life, he created an aura of majesty that discouraged dissent and cemented his place in history. Similarly, Napoleon Bonaparte understood the power of spectacle, using grand military parades, theatrical coronations, and carefully staged portraits to project strength and control. Spectacles work by distracting people from unpleasant realities. A ruler facing political instability can divert attention through national celebrations, military displays, or grand infrastructure projects. This tactic is frequently used in modern politics and media. Leaders and corporations employ visually striking advertisements, social media campaigns, and elaborate public events to maintain influence. A well-crafted spectacle can obscure weaknesses and create an illusion of power, making it difficult for opponents to undermine authority. Greene emphasizes that the best spectacles are not just empty displays, but carry deep symbolic weight. A powerful symbol, such as a national flag, a crown, or a religious relic, can unify people under a single cause and reinforce the authority of its wielder. The key is to choose imagery that resonates emotionally with the audience, ensuring that they associate power and stability with the orchestrator of the spectacle. However, one must be cautious not to overuse this tactic. A poorly executed spectacle can appear contrived or desperate, eroding credibility. Spectacles should be carefully planned to maximize impact and should always align with the message one wishes to convey. A ruler who relies too much on empty grandeur without substance risks losing respect. The most effective power players understand how to balance theatrics with tangible action, ensuring that the spectacle reinforces rather than replaces their authority. Law 38. Think as you like but behave like others. Individuality is valuable, but in the game of power, it can also be dangerous. Greene warns that openly displaying unconventional thoughts, beliefs, or behaviors can alienate people, making them suspicious or hostile. Society values conformity, and those who flaunt their differences risk being ostracized, ridiculed, or even persecuted. The wise strategist understands that it is safer to blend in while keeping their true thoughts concealed, only revealing them to trusted confidants. Throughout history, countless figures have suffered for defying societal norms. Galileo Galilei, despite being correct in his assertion that the Earth revolved around the sun, was condemned by the Church for contradicting accepted doctrine. Oscar Wilde, known for his flamboyant disregard for social conventions, was celebrated for a time but ultimately destroyed by the same society that once admired him. Their downfall was not due to the correctness of their ideas, but rather their refusal to conceal them. Greene advises that rather than openly opposing societal norms, a person should learn to navigate them subtly. This does not mean abandoning one's beliefs, but rather expressing them strategically. A person who wishes to introduce radical ideas must first gain the trust of those around them, presenting themselves as part of the group before gradually influencing opinions from within. This principle is often seen in politics, where reformers gain power by initially aligning with existing structures before implementing change. The key to success lies in reading the room. If one must express unconventional thoughts, it is best done in private or among like-minded individuals. Publicly, it is wiser to follow established customs and behaviors, ensuring that no unnecessary hostility is invited. Even those in positions of great power, such as rulers or corporate leaders, often maintain a facade of tradition while secretly shaping the world according to their vision. There are, of course, exceptions to this rule. If a person already possesses an unshakable position of power, they may afford to be eccentric or rebellious without fear of consequences. However, such individuals are rare, and for most, blending in remains the safer and more effective strategy. Greene concludes that power comes not from making enemies through defiance, but from mastering the art of appearing conventional while quietly shaping one's own destiny. Law 39. Stir up waters to catch fish. Anger and emotional turmoil are weaknesses that can be exploited. Greene asserts that a powerful individual should always maintain their composure, never allowing themselves to be provoked or drawn into emotional battles. However, while one should remain calm, there is great strategic value in making others lose control. By stirring up conflict, exposing insecurities, or frustrating opponents, one can manipulate them into making rash decisions that ultimately weaken their position. One of the greatest historical examples of this tactic comes from military strategy. Generals like Sun Tzu and Napoleon Bonaparte understood that an enemy who is emotional and desperate is easier to defeat. By applying pressure, creating uncertainty, or feeding misinformation, they force their opponents into making costly mistakes. Similarly, in politics, a leader who remains composed while their opponents are seen as irrational or out of control will always appear stronger in the eyes of the public. This principle is also evident in interpersonal relationships in business. Skilled negotiators know that by remaining patient and calm, they can provoke their counterparts into overreacting, making concessions, or revealing valuable information. Likewise, in debates or confrontations, maintaining a cool demeanor while subtly agitating the opponent can lead them to self-destruct, damaging their credibility. Greene warns that anger is often a mask for insecurity. Those who are easily provoked reveal their weaknesses, making them vulnerable to manipulation. A person who can be made to react emotionally is no longer thinking strategically. They become impulsive and predictable. The most effective power players learn to remain unshaken, using their adversary's emotional instability to their advantage. However, this law comes with a warning. While stirring up conflict can be useful, it must be done with precision. Provoking the wrong person or miscalculating their response can backfire. A powerful individual must know when to push and when to retreat, ensuring that they remain in control of the situation at all times. Additionally, excessive manipulation can create enemies who will seek revenge, so discretion is essential. Ultimately, those who master this law understand how to use chaos to their benefit while remaining untouched by it. They recognize that emotions are a weapon, both to be wielded against others and guarded against within themselves. By learning to stay composed while creating disruption in others, one gains the upper hand, ensuring that adversaries make the mistakes that lead to their downfall. Law 40. Despise the free lunch. The promise of something for nothing is often a dangerous illusion. Greene argues that what is offered for free usually carries hidden obligations, traps, or concealed costs. Accepting gifts, favors, or free opportunities can place one in a position of weakness where they become indebted to the giver, either socially, politically, or emotionally. In the realm of power, nothing comes without a price, and those who seek to maintain independence must be wary of generosity that seems too good to be true. Throughout history, powerful individuals have understood the dangers of the free lunch. Monarchs and leaders have often rejected gifts from foreign powers, knowing that such tokens often come with expectations of future alliances, influence, or compliance. For instance, the Mughal emperors were wary of foreign traders bearing lavish presents, as these were often attempts to gain a foothold in the empire. Similarly, in modern times, corporations use free trials, samples, or perks to subtly lock customers into long-term commitments. By accepting something without immediate cost, people often find themselves bound by gratitude or obligation, making it harder to walk away. The wise individual understands that it is better to pay full price for something of value rather than be drawn into an unseen agreement. By paying one's way, one maintains autonomy and avoids manipulation. Generosity can be used strategically, but it should be on one's own terms. Those who freely distribute gifts with no apparent motive often do so to gain leverage or control. Therefore, one must always question the intentions behind any act of charity or kindness. Greene also highlights the power of controlled generosity. A person who is seen as magnanimous and willing to spend on others often attracts admiration and loyalty. However, this must be done in a way that reinforces one's power rather than making them seem dependent or weak. Money, when circulated wisely, acts as a tool for influence. By giving strategically rather than accepting indiscriminately, one ensures that every transaction strengthens their position. In the end, the lesson is clear. Free things often come at a greater cost than paying outright. True power comes from self-sufficiency, and those who wish to maintain their freedom must learn to reject seemingly generous offers that may entangle them in unseen obligations. Law 41. Avoid stepping into a great man's shoes. Following in the footsteps of a legendary figure is a perilous endeavor. Greene warns that when one succeeds a great leader or inherits the legacy of a powerful individual, they risk living in their shadow and being constantly compared to them. No matter how competent or innovative the successor may be, they will often be judged by the achievements of their predecessor, making it difficult to establish their own identity. To truly gain power, one must break free from the past and carve out their own path, ensuring that they are remembered for their own merits, rather than as a mere continuation of someone else's work. History offers numerous examples of individuals who have struggled with this challenge. The son of a renowned ruler often faces immense pressure to live up to their father's accomplishments. Louis XVI of France, for instance, was overshadowed by the legacy of his grandfather, Louis XIV, the Sun King. Despite his own abilities, he was unable to match the grandeur and authority of his predecessor, leading to a decline in monarchical power. In contrast, Napoleon Bonaparte, rather than trying to imitate past French rulers, established his own distinct vision of leadership, creating a legacy that stood apart from the kings before him. The best strategy for avoiding this trap is to deliberately differentiate oneself from the previous figure. Rather than continuing their traditions, one should make bold changes, redefine the role, and present a fresh vision that distances them from the past. This approach was successfully employed by Franklin D. Roosevelt, who, despite coming from a prestigious political family, shaped his presidency in a radically different way than his cousin Theodore Roosevelt, ensuring that he was seen as a leader in his own right. Greene emphasizes that breaking away from the past does not mean outright rejecting it, but rather reinterpreting it in a way that asserts individuality. A ruler who inherits a strong military legacy, for example, might focus instead on diplomacy and economic growth, shifting the narrative to their own strengths. By avoiding direct comparisons and refusing to be confined by historical expectations, a person ensures that they are recognized as a force of their own, rather than a mere continuation of someone else's greatness. Ultimately, stepping into a great man's shoes is a trap that few can navigate successfully. To achieve true power, one must establish a unique identity, redefine the narrative, and ensure that their legacy stands independently of any predecessor. Those who fail to do so risk being forever seen as a shadow of someone else, rather than a leader in their own right. Law 42. Strike the shepherd and the sheep will scatter. In every group, movement, or organization, there is often a central figure who holds everything together. Greene argues that when seeking to dismantle a structure or weaken an opposing force, the most effective strategy is to target its leader. Rather than engaging in battles with numerous individuals, it is far more efficient to remove the person who acts as the glue, causing the rest to fall into disarray. By striking at the shepherd, the sheep, those who follow blindly, will be left directionless, making them easier to control or neutralize. History is filled with instances where removing a leader has led to the collapse of an entire movement. The fall of Napoleon Bonaparte, for instance, signaled the rapid decline of French dominance in Europe. His military prowess and charismatic leadership had kept France united through years of war, but once he was exiled, the empire quickly crumbled. Similarly, in ancient Rome, the assassination of Julius Caesar led to years of instability and civil war, as his unifying influence was suddenly gone. This law applies not only to politics and warfare, but also to business and social structures. A corporation dominated by a charismatic CEO may falter if that figure is removed, especially if they have failed to build a strong support system. Likewise, in social circles, a particularly influential individual can shape opinions and dictate trends. Neutralizing them can shift the entire dynamic in one's favor. Identifying and removing key figures who control groups is a tactic used in both historical and modern conflicts to destabilize opposition. However, Greene warns that simply striking the leader is not enough. It must be done in a way that ensures they cannot recover or retaliate. A weakened but still present leader may rally their followers and become a martyr. The most effective approach is to completely remove their influence, either through exile, discrediting, or outright destruction. This ensures that their followers become disoriented and unable to regroup. The lesson of this law is clear. Power structures rely on central figures. By identifying and eliminating these figures, one can create instability that works to their advantage. Whether in politics, business, or personal rivalries, understanding who holds the true influence allows for strategic targeting that weakens entire networks. Those who fail to recognize the importance of striking at the shepherd often find themselves entangled in endless struggles with the scattered but still dangerous sheep. Law 43. Work on the hearts and minds of others. Power gained through coercion is unstable and often leads to resistance. Greene argues that true and lasting power comes from winning people over emotionally, influencing their desires, beliefs, and loyalties. If people feel connected to a leader on a deep level, they will willingly follow rather than being forced into submission. The key to achieving this is understanding the psychology of others and appealing to their emotions, values, and vulnerabilities. One of the best historical examples of this principle is found in the strategies of Zhuge Liang, a brilliant strategist of ancient China. When dealing with rebellious southern tribes, he could have easily used military force to crush them. However, he recognized that true control could not be maintained through fear alone. Instead, he repeatedly captured the enemy leader, Meng Huo, only to release him each time, treating him with kindness and honor. Eventually, Meng Huo was so moved by Liang's treatment that he voluntarily surrendered, pledging loyalty to Liang for the rest of his life. This approach was far more effective than violence, as it ensured the loyalty of an entire region without the need for constant force. Understanding people's motivations is essential to working on their hearts and minds. Most individuals are driven by personal interest, fear, or deep-seated emotions. Those in power must learn to recognize what people value most and use it to build loyalty. A ruler, for example, who ensures his subjects' prosperity and security will have their unwavering support, while one who governs through brute force will always have to look over his shoulder. Similarly, a leader who recognizes his followers' need for validation, purpose, or status can secure their dedication through carefully crafted gestures, praise, and shared vision. This law also emphasizes the importance of symbols, rituals, and emotional appeals. Great leaders throughout history have understood the power of spectacle and inspiration. Religious leaders, political figures, and revolutionary thinkers have successfully used moving speeches, cultural symbols, and carefully staged events to create deep emotional bonds with their followers. Napoleon Bonaparte, for instance, mastered the art of public spectacle, using grand military parades, dramatic proclamations, and personal interactions with his soldiers to make them feel valued and motivated. However, Greene warns that ignoring the hearts and minds of others can be disastrous. Those who focus solely on strategy and force without cultivating genuine support risk alienating people and facing resistance. Even the most authoritarian rulers have recognized the need to maintain the illusion of public support. The most effective power players balance strategy with emotional intelligence, ensuring that those they lead feel seen, valued, and inspired to follow willingly. Law 44. Disarm and infuriate with the mirror effect. The power of mirroring lies in its ability to confuse, disarm, and ultimately manipulate others. Greene argues that when one mirrors an opponent's actions, words, or emotions, it creates an unsettling effect that either lulls them into complacency or drives them to irrational behavior. The mirror effect is a psychological weapon that can be used to mock, seduce, or neutralize enemies, depending on how it is applied. One of the most effective ways to use this strategy is through imitation. When an adversary is aggressive or hostile, responding with the exact same behavior often unsettles them. By mirroring their words, tone, or gestures, one can make them feel as though they are fighting themselves. This creates confusion and frustration, making them more likely to overreact and expose weaknesses. Greene notes that many skilled negotiators and interrogators use this technique to wear down their opponents, forcing them into emotional outbursts that reveal their true intentions. Another way to employ the mirror effect is through flattery and seduction. People are naturally drawn to those who reflect their own qualities, beliefs, and emotions. By mirroring a person's interests, speech patterns, and attitudes, one can create a sense of rapport and trust. Salespeople, politicians, and con artists have long used this method to make themselves appear relatable and likable, gaining influence over those they wish to manipulate. The mirror effect can also be used as a form of mockery or revenge. By exaggerating an opponent's behavior or reflecting their flaws back at them, one can make them look ridiculous in the eyes of others. This tactic was famously used by Napoleon Bonaparte, who would publicly imitate his enemies' mannerisms and speech, making them objects of ridicule. By holding up a mirror to someone's worst traits, one can damage their reputation and undermine their authority. However, Greene warns that this tactic must be used carefully. If applied too blatantly, mirroring can become obvious and provoke retaliation. It is most effective when executed subtly, making the target feel as though they are facing an inexplicable force rather than deliberate mimicry. Additionally, mirroring must always serve a strategic purpose, whether it is to lull an opponent into a false sense of security, provoke them into self-destruction, or build rapport for long-term influence. When used correctly, the mirror effect is a powerful tool for psychological warfare, capable of controlling, confusing, and defeating even the most formidable adversaries. Law 45, preach the need for change but never reform, too much at once. People may claim to want change, but in reality, they are creatures of habit who resist drastic upheavals. Greene argues that those in power must introduce reforms gradually, ensuring that they feel like a natural evolution rather than a radical departure from the past. Too much change at once can provoke fear, resistance, and even rebellion, while slow, incremental change allows people to adapt and accept new realities. One of the most famous historical examples of this principle is found in the reign of Napoleon III of France. When he came to power, he recognized that outright revolution was too dangerous, as it would alienate both the aristocracy and the common people. Instead, he introduced reforms gradually, maintaining the appearance of tradition while subtly reshaping the political and economic landscape. By doing so, he avoided the violent backlash that often accompanies sudden transformations. Successful leaders understand that people are attached to familiarity. When implementing change, it is crucial to maintain some elements of the past, allowing people to feel a sense of continuity. This is why even the most radical regimes often preserve certain traditions, symbols, or institutions to maintain stability. For example, when Mao Zedong led the Communist Revolution in China, he retained elements of Confucian rhetoric and imperial-style governance to legitimize his rule in the eyes of the people. The art of gradual reform also involves managing expectations. If people believe that change is happening too quickly or is being forced upon them, they will resist. However, if they are led to believe that change is their own choice or a necessary adaptation, they will embrace it more willingly. This is why skillful politicians and reformers often frame their policies as necessary adjustments rather than radical departures from the past. They present new ideas as extensions of old values, ensuring that people feel comfortable rather than threatened. Greene warns that attempting to reform too much at once can create powerful enemies. Those who have benefited from the old system will fight to preserve their position, and those who feel alienated by sudden change may rally against it. The key to successful reform is patience and subtlety, small shifts over time that eventually lead to major transformations. By making change feel inevitable yet non-threatening, a leader can reshape society, business, or any institution without provoking unnecessary resistance. Law 46. Never appear too perfect. In the pursuit of power, one of the most dangerous things a person can do is to appear flawless. Greene warns that displaying too much perfection will inevitably stir envy in those around you. When others perceive someone as being too successful, too accomplished, or too untouchable, they begin to resent them and look for ways to bring them down. Throughout history, many figures have met their downfall not because of their failures, but because they appeared too superior, making others feel insecure or inadequate. One of the greatest examples of this principle is Julius Caesar, whose rising power and apparent invincibility ultimately led to his assassination. Despite being beloved by the Roman people, his unchecked ambition and the perception that he was above everyone else provoked envy among the senators, who conspired to eliminate him. Similarly, the downfall of Nicolas Fouquet, the finance minister of Louis XIV, illustrates this law. Fouquet lived extravagantly and threw a lavish party in honor of the king, believing that his wealth and generosity would secure his position. Instead, his opulence only made Louis XIV feel overshadowed, leading to his imprisonment for life. To avoid becoming a target of envy, it is essential to cultivate an image of relatability and humility. Greene advises that those in positions of power should subtly downplay their successes, making them seem more like the result of luck, effort, or collaboration rather than personal brilliance. By deflecting attention away from themselves and spreading praise to others, they can reduce hostility and ensure their continued influence. One of the best ways to do this is to make others feel important. Allowing them to believe they contribute significantly to one's success can prevent resentment and foster loyalty. At the same time, strategically revealing minor flaws can humanize a powerful figure. A ruler who occasionally admits a small mistake or a wealthy individual who engages in acts of humility can appear more relatable, disarming potential rivals. Franklin D. Roosevelt, for example, maintained an air of warmth and charm that made people feel he was one of them, despite his immense power. By contrast, those who present themselves as flawless, infallible, or above ordinary concerns often find themselves isolated and resented. Greene concludes that power is best exercised with subtlety. The key is to balance strength with accessibility, projecting confidence while ensuring that others do not feel threatened by one's success. A wise leader knows when to step back, when to appear vulnerable, and when to let others share in the illusion of control. By mastering this delicate balance, one can remain powerful without becoming a target for envy-driven destruction. Law 47. Do not go past the mark you aimed for. In victory, learn when to stop. Success can be intoxicating, and one of the most common mistakes people make is pushing their victories too far. Greene cautions that once a goal has been achieved, it is crucial to stop and consolidate gains rather than overreaching. Those who continue to press forward beyond their initial objectives often find that they provoke new enemies, stretch themselves too thin, or lose sight of their original purpose, ultimately leading to their downfall. History is filled with examples of individuals who failed to recognize when to stop. Napoleon Bonaparte, after successfully conquering much of Europe, became obsessed with further expansion. Instead of solidifying his power, he launched an ill-fated invasion of Russia, which led to his eventual defeat and exile. Had he stopped at his earlier victories, he might have ruled Europe indefinitely. Similarly, Adolf Hitler's initial military conquests were highly successful, but his refusal to halt his expansionism, particularly his invasion of the Soviet Union, led to the collapse of Nazi Germany. The key to maintaining power is recognizing the moment of victory and knowing when to retreat. A skillful leader understands that every success contains the seeds of potential failure if pushed too far. When an opponent has been defeated, continuing to humiliate them or press further advantages can backfire, creating resentment and setting the stage for retaliation. This principle applies not only in war but in business, politics, and personal rivalries. One of the most effective strategies is to exit at the height of one's success, leaving a lasting impression of strength. In sports and entertainment, some of the most revered figures are those who retire at their peak, rather than fading into mediocrity. Similarly, in politics, leaders who step down voluntarily while still popular maintain a powerful legacy, whereas those who cling to power too long often face disgrace. Greene suggests that one of the greatest dangers of success is hubris, the belief that one is invincible. Those who achieve power often become blinded by their own victories, believing they can continue winning indefinitely. However, power is cyclical, and every rise is followed by a fall. By recognizing the right moment to stop, one can avoid the inevitable backlash that comes from pushing too far. A truly powerful person understands that restraint is as important as ambition, and that knowing when to walk away is the ultimate demonstration of control. Law 48. Assume formlessness. Adaptability is the ultimate key to power. Greene argues that those who remain rigid in their strategies, identities, or methods will eventually be outmaneuvered by more flexible opponents. The world is constantly changing, and those who cling to fixed positions, ideologies, or ways of thinking become predictable and vulnerable. True power lies in the ability to flow like water, adjusting to new circumstances without being trapped by them. One of the greatest examples of this principle is the legendary Chinese general Sun Tzu, who emphasized the importance of adaptability in warfare. He taught that a general should never be bound by fixed plans, but should instead respond dynamically to the movements of the enemy. Similarly, the Mongol Empire, under the leadership of Genghis Khan, succeeded largely because of its ability to adapt to different terrains, enemy tactics, and cultural challenges. Unlike other empires that imposed rigid structures, the Mongols absorbed the strengths of the peoples they conquered, ensuring their long-term dominance. In politics and business, the same rule applies. Companies that fail to evolve with changing markets and technologies become obsolete, while those that continuously reinvent themselves remain relevant. Nokia, once a leader in mobile phones, fell into decline because it failed to adapt to the smartphone revolution. In contrast, companies like Apple and Amazon have thrived by continuously reshaping their strategies, never allowing themselves to become stagnant. Greene also highlights that personal power depends on flexibility. Those who define themselves too narrowly, whether by a specific ideology, profession, or identity, risk becoming trapped by it. A person who insists on following the same career path despite changing circumstances may find themselves irrelevant. By contrast, individuals who remain open to new opportunities, skills, and perspectives are more likely to thrive in unpredictable environments. The principle of formlessness also applies to conflict and competition. A rigid opponent is easy to defeat because they can be anticipated, whereas an unpredictable adversary is much harder to counter. In negotiations, diplomacy, and power struggles, those who keep their intentions fluid and adaptable maintain the upper hand. By refusing to be pinned down, they create confusion in their enemies while preserving their own ability to shift directions when needed. Greene concludes that the ultimate mastery of power is to embrace change rather than resist it. By remaining formless, one becomes untouchable, never locked into a single approach, never predictable, and never easily defeated. Power belongs not to those who build unshakable structures, but to those who move freely within the ever-changing currents of the world. And that's a wrap on The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. If you found these insights valuable, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. I'd love to hear your biggest takeaways, and if there's a book you'd like me to summarize next, let me know in the comments. See you in the next one, with much love and gratitude.